episode 105.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Welcome back to the fifth episode 105 of Wireless LAN Professionals podcast. Glad you could come back. Starting today, we've got a quick little 10 talk from one of our WLPC 10 talk series, plus an interview I did with Jussi on the history of Ekahau, kind of backing up to see where they came from and where they're going. A discussion with Devin, Akin about APs and antenna mounting, and plus an interview I did with Martin Ericson on those of you who are applying for your CWNE, some ideas of how to put together your CWNE application.
10 Talks.
So I'm not sure, I think that on the schedule it said comprehensive wireless LAN testing, but it's really performance testing that we're going to be focusing on. And to get started, I just want to do a quick poll to try to find out what kind of testing experience we have in the audience, and then also give me an idea of what I can spend more time on. So first of all, single AP performance testing, and not just not just a client throughput, but more like a formal plan where you had a series of test cases, maybe some voice, some video, maybe a combination of voice, video, and data. Can I see a show of hands? Okay. All right, how about for multi-AP, same kind of thing? And how about multi-AP including roaming tests, voice roaming? So good, so it's all very relevant. So one more, how about in competitive bake-offs? Anybody? Yeah, okay, good stuff, all right. So a little bit about me. I've spent a lot of time doing performance testing. Years ago in an RF chamber, 2.4, locked away for, it seems like days on end. But now that it's more of a 5 gig world, where's Devin? Yeah, more of a 5 gig world. I've been let out of the chamber, and I spent a lot of time in a 20,000 square foot carpeted facility that was dedicated for performance testing and did a lot of competitive performance testing, everything you can think of pretty much. And that's may sometimes be bad, we'll see. Time will tell with all that radiation. All right, so the process, just a little bit about the process. If you, well, for me anyways, it's all about trying to determine if a use case is going to work for the customer. I was out in the field for many, many years, and to me, is the network going to work? Are all devices, all applications, going to work everywhere throughout the whole network all the time? So really trying to nail down the use case and then trying your best to model that use case. And sometimes it's really not possible because modeling the environment is probably the hardest thing, but at least trying to determine what the use case is and then going for it. There's obviously different types of testing. QA testing may use VeriWave more than, like, for instance, the type of testing I do where I'll use Chariot and I'll use other things like iPerf. And then you also you have to get the right kind of clients, right? So if you're going to be if you're a customer, they're going to see mostly two-stream clients or single-stream clients, then you want to use those type of clients when you're doing the testing. So just making sure you model as closely as you can to what the use case is going to be. All right, so just quickly about some use cases. So for high density lecture hall, that would be maybe categorized as like a high density, maybe moderate throughput or high throughput. It depends on what the application is. So that type of use case, it was something that I could model in the facility that I was in. Hotel room, guest room, you'll have voice, video, data, but it wouldn't be very high throughput because we know that the pipes going out to the internet where all the services are, and they're not going to have video services local, at least not in the US. So you're going to, it wouldn't be a very high throughput, but just to make sure voice, video, and data work. And ICUs, how many have done any kind of testing or work with ICUs? I'm sure it's so they can be high density because you can have a lot of devices connected to a single patient, infusion pumps and monitoring and so on. So you can get pretty high density in those type of environments. Now, that type of test, you can't model exactly with the type of clients most of the time, because then you'd have to partner with well, you'd have to get the hosp errors and all the other well challenged, all type of devices in, which is very often difficult. But for those type of scenarios, you may be able to get the environment from like where a hospital that will partner with you and put aside. They actually, for instance, Kaiser Permanente, they have a fake hospital nearby where you can do your testing, so you might be able to do that, for instance. Okay, for a lot of times you'll see for electronics, you'll see where they want to stream local content, so you can get very high density, high throughput type of environment with streaming video. And airport terminals, high density, maybe low throughput, where all the clients are rate limited. All different types of devices. K through 12, video streaming, it's a big part of curriculum in a lot of schools. And that content can be fairly high quality, so maybe not very high density, moderate density, but with high throughput per device. All right, so for tools for traffic simulation, we use JPerf. We'd like to use Chariot. I've been a big fan of Chariot for many years, moving to version 8 like Chuck suggested. But not everyone has Chariot out in the field, so for bake-off, sometimes if you're preparing your team for a bake-off, if you work for a vendor or you work for a VAR, and you're preparing your team for a bake-off, you may actually have to do the testing with iPerf if that's all they have, or Temasoft throughput test. Exia VeriWave, that's more, we see QA using that more. I've seen it in bake-offs, but it's really rare that you see that in bake-offs, probably because it's a more expensive tool. And for monitoring and analysis, these are the tools that I would have open pretty much all the time while I'm doing the testing, because most of the testing I've done in the last several years has been open air. So you have to watch those channels like a hawk, because the building that we had for doing the testing in the past was far enough away from neighboring buildings so that you didn't have to worry about it too much. But most of the time, you're not going to have that luxury. So if you have a channel or two channels or whatever set aside for your performance testing, you kind of have to watch those channels all the time. And if someone jumps on those channels, or if there's non-Wi-Fi interference on those channels, it would invalidate your results. So we'd watch those very carefully. As far as clients, Chuck, that's a great lab. I'm envious. Yeah. So, but we try to build out the lab as much as we can with a diverse set of clients, again, to model what our customers would be using. And I put PlayStation there because actually in higher ed, anyone in higher ed, you got to get those PlayStations working right in the dormitories. So we'd have some of those. We'd have all kinds of devices, all different manufacturers. So there's a little QA happening here. When you have a mix of clients, there's not just performance testing, but then a little bit of QA happens as well, unfortunately. All right, for the applications, there's so many that you would use, but again, we try to use the applications that the customer might use. So I don't have like vBrick here, but you might, if you're a university, you're working with the university and you want to do some testing, you might have some type of media streaming server. We would use Windows, we test with Link, FaceTime for doing video conferencing, and VLC. VLC is very popular, and everyone uses it. It's great for multicast, sourcing multicast or unicast over HTTP. We use Windows Media Streaming Server mainly for sourcing a unicast over RTP, for instance. Okay, this is an eye chart. I threw it up there, but this would be something that we'd put on the end of a report, like a presentation. We'd have a slide or two or three setting the parameters, so how we tested it, how many APs we used, how many channels we used, DFS, not DFS, what type of traffic, which application we used to source the traffic, and a little about the clients and so on. So that you'll have that if you want for reference, and more of the same. In this case, we said Skype was used for voice. We use FaceTime for video conferencing, and we had some for this particular. This is a multi-AP test, and we would do the roaming with FaceTime. How many at universities will you see students actually walking around with like FaceTime or Skype and video conferencing? Because I've asked this question before, and it's a real use case. I find it hard, but people are video conferencing and walking around. So we had to test it. So now here's an example of but just 8 test cases for a multi-AP test. So start with low density just to get an idea of the capacity. So you wouldn't have very many clients per radio in that case. You're really not factoring in contention. You're just trying to see what the throughput you can get without those externalities. Then you would go to high density where you have a lot of contention. And in this particular test, well, let's say we had a 20,000 square foot facility and we didn't have DFS channels. We'd have to reuse channels. If we use wider channels, we'd have to reuse channels. So you'd have contention, co-channel interference to deal with, and potentially adjacent channel interference. And so we could see, the impact of that type of network. Otherwise, we could have DFS channels and not have to reuse channels at all, and then we would, not have to worry about co-channel interference. So I have data downstream and upstream. We used to use a 9-to-1 ratio. But as applications change with more social media, that ratio has changed. So you'll see in this example test template I have that it's more like I think it have 7-to-3. So, and I've seen some reports where it's like arenas where it's actually I think it was in the World Cup was like something like 4 up to 6 down or something like that. It was the upstream. So upstream is growing. So you want to model those patterns. And then you have some other ones here where you have a combination of voice or video and data. And probably the one that is going to be the most challenging is really the last one, voice, video conference, and data upstream and data downstream. So that's challenging. And if you do this type of testing, especially in a multi-IP environment where you have to reuse your channels, you see how things break down pretty quickly, and it's pretty eye-opening. That's an example set of test cases. Let me move on to a workbook. We don't always have a chance to put together a formal written test plan. A lot of times, you hear about a bake-off and you're going to have these test cases. You've seen the bake-off test plan anyways. So you just put together a spreadsheet to get that data. And if you're using Chariot for a lot of the throughput tests, if you can create I'm going to make this fit a little better. It's probably very hard to see. Let me see if I have I don't have a pointer, but I'll just step out here. So anyways, you're able to, if you're using Chariot, for instance, you can get that, save it as a CSV, and then just cut and paste it and throw it in here, and then sort. And what we do here, this is a very useful thing to do if you're trying to see if your clients are going to meet an SLA. You actually take them, and then you can sort them from best performer to worst performer. In this case, we have single stream 11N clients. It's hard to read, but those are iPad minis, 2 spatial stream MacBook Airs, and then some MacBook Pros. And we sort for each individual type of client, worst to best, and then we plot it. And so you can see that the red line, it looks like pretty much, on average, each type of client's getting about the same amount of throughput. But then the blue line represents, as you have these lesser capable clients, you're going to see less throughput. And then the dual spatial streams, you'll get more throughput. And then the 3 spatial streams, you'll get even more. And so this would be indicating from, I'd look at that and say, well, AP vendor A is doing airtime fairness, whereas AP vendor B is not doing airtime fairness because you don't see the benefits of having a faster phi rate. So anyways, if you sort the traffic like that, there's a couple of things you can reveal. And there are lots of other, actually I have lots of other sheets in here where it's ready-made, so you just do the test, you throw it in there, and then you can get your graphs and you can do your reports and present your data. So it kind of speeds things up. And I can make that available to that spreadsheet. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for the time, and I'd like to continue the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you.
And now,
let's jump into our main session.
Well, welcome. I'm in Helsinki today with Jussi, and I can never say your last name. Jussi, how do you say your last name?
Kiviniemi.
Thank you. Kiviniemi. Okay, we got it close. Anyway, we're here at Ekahau's headquarters in overlooking a beautiful day in the harbor right here. And I thought, since we're here in Ekahau, I could do a little interview and we could talk a little bit about the history of Ekahau, where it came from, how you've been involved on, off, and on again. So, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you. Thanks a lot, Keith, and thanks for coming in. Really appreciate you making the trip every now and then. So that's
it's easily worth the trip.
It's been a great day, and hey, and we had a good lunch.
We had a good lunch up on top of a water. I have never had lunch on top of a water tank before, so kind of a unique little feature there. So, how did you get involved in Ekahau?
Long story short, I was actually I was studying at the university, and then somehow I ended up, in a project that did back in 2000, maybe 2000. I wound it up in a project that did citywide Wi-Fi in a university. So it was a research project where we kind of tried to understand, can you do this Wi-Fi networks on a larger scale, and how would it work, stuff like that. And I ended up on because I'm not a radio guy by background, so I got on the application and business model side of things. So I was basically coding location-aware applications and looking at the business models on how this could, be made profitable, kind of a, bipolar thing.
So what was your education in? When you were in university, what were you studying?
I started in information technology, but then I quite quickly realized that my patience doesn't allow me to become a coder. So I changed to industrial engineering and management, and then my minor was in IT. So it's, another bipolar thing. Nothing really properly, but doing a lot of things a little bit.
Well, good. So you were on this project kind of as an intern, and then how did it turn into a job?
Yeah, and it was convenient, right? So when I was not studying, so summers full time, and then evenings, and when I had breaks from my studies, like 1 hour here, 1 hour there, I could go to the just to my workroom, which was at the university. I was a researcher at the university. I could go there and do work, 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever. So then it became at some point I started doing my thesis. Also to the same place, and then it became a full-time job. And the thesis was all about the Wi-Fi, globe or citywide Wi-Fi network and the applications running on top of it and the business models.
So this was back when we thought citywide Wi-Fi was going to be a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody ever understood the magnitude of Wi-Fi at that point. It was just one of the radio technologies, really. It wasn't called Wi-Fi either, as you know.
Yeah. It was just that stuff, yeah. So that was with Ekahau had already started at that time.
Ekahau had barely started. I think on paper Ekahau started in 2000, but the operation started in 2001. Yeah. And then after graduating, I saw a job ad for Ekahau field engineer, or like a pre-sales systems engineer, trainer, whatever, like a hybrid role. And I applied and got the job and moved from my university town to Helsinki, and that was in 2002. So Ekahau was 10 people strong, something like that.
Oh, one of the early adopters there. And no ESS, no survey software back then?
No survey software. We did have a location tracking platform, though, that worked on laptops and PDA. So laptops with Orinoco cards and PDA devices with Orinoco cards and sleeves. We could track them very accurately. We didn't have a business model, but we have awesome location tracking technology.
Who needs a business model? You just need really cool stuff.
Yeah, just look at Twitter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good example. I think ESS was not quite the same there. So how did ESS as a software support that RTLS world?
So in the RTLS world, how the location tracking system was set up is that in order to track stuff really accurately using just Wi-Fi signals indoors, we needed to calibrate the system, which essentially meant walking around the entire site, clicking our location on the map, so that the tool would understand the RF signals. So when we were tracking the actual PDA, we would compare the current Wi-Fi readings of the PDA to the recorded Wi-Fi readings on the map. And based on that and some really, really smart algorithms, we could very accurately pinpoint the location of the device. So in a way, we were already doing a site survey, because we were kind of map stamping these, Wi-Fi readings. We were putting Wi-Fi readings on the map, and as a side product to create a really accurate Wi-Fi tracking system, the APs needed to be placed properly. We kind of figured that out pretty quickly. And in order for us to understand if the APs were placed properly, we would need to see their signals. So we built like a really rudimentary Wi-Fi signal analysis engine into the location calibrator. And
what was it called back then?
First it was the Ekahau calibrator, and then it was the Ekahau manager. And it had a free of charge evaluation version back in the day that you could just, you could start tracking your laptop or PDA anywhere, just download the software and do it. And it was really cool. But people started, we also asked in the evaluation form, why do you want to use this? What do you want to use the location tracking for? And more and more of the people were saying, I want to use it for Wi-Fi site survey purposes. And we were like, we don't understand what this is, but let's find out. And it turned out that it had something to do with designing proper Wi-Fi networks, in a professional way. You were probably one of those guys using it. And yeah, so we figured okay, if these guys are using it for this purpose, they're not paying any money for it, but maybe they could. So we rang a few of those guys, checked out if there's any competition. There wasn't any, because nobody was doing any kind of Wi-Fi heat mapping, on a professional level at the time. So we were like, okay, let's just quickly, spend 1 or 2 months and spin some kind of a product out of it. And of course, it wasn't 1 or 2 months. It was much longer than that.
Well, that's that predictive. I think we're going to take 2 months, and that's coding months. They're a little longer than normal months.
Yeah. It's like the inverse of dog years or something like that. But so yeah, then we kind of had that idea very late 2002, and we came out with the first version of ESS 2003. It had no prediction engine, it had no capacity, it had no reporting, but it did have the survey capability and basic signal strength analysis.
And so at what point did Ekahau change from PDA tracking to tags?
That was when I was living in Silicon Valley, kind of ramping up the US operations. So 2004, we had the first black box tags. They were about the size of this recording device you cannot see right now, but they were big and bulky tags, and size of 3 hockey pucks or so. And we took them to one big car manufacturer's factory, and I was actually deploying those, so I was, configuring them using serial cable, using terminal commands, and everything broke all the time. But it was one of the first Wi-Fi tag deployments ever.
And then those tags obviously got smaller and smaller, lighter, and PDAs kind of went away.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened, and really today, pretty much all of the RTLS business is in the tags when it comes to enterprise RTLS tracking, and it's biggest chunk of that is in healthcare. Of course, retail and all that with tracking consumers is now huge and hot and all that, but that's a different ball game. But if you talk about enterprise Wi-Fi RTLS, it's really healthcare asset tracking is by far the thing there.
So the current product called Site Survey started as a configurer for RTLS. Along the way, it's got better and better, and you've been part of that. Talk a little bit about the path from 2003, 2004, when it first started, to where we are today.
Yeah, funny story. Yeah, it got better and better despite the fact I was there. Actually, first it was a separate product from the RTLS, so they didn't have any compatibility with one another. We just, took the RTLS code and made it a whole different product, and they lived their own lives for a couple of years. And then at some point, first it did horrible. Actually, nobody bought our site survey tool. But at some point it started selling quite a bit. We were pushing it with my colleague in Silicon Valley quite a bit, and got into Cisco and Proximman, which was big at the time, and we made an OEM deal with Aerospace, which was acquired by Cisco, and we talked to everybody. Aruba, we made an OEM deal with Meru, we made an OEM deal with Fluke Networks, which lasted only for so long, and
So you were the first Fluke site survey software.
We really were, yeah, for a few years. People don't really know that because site survey software wasn't a big hit still back in the day, and Air Magnet quite quickly, to be honest, did take on the market. But we were kind of riding the first wave of site survey software, so we were really successful at some point. And then I was called back from Silicon Valley to back to Finland to the R&D headquarters to kind of head the development of the next generations of the site survey tool, and then it started growing from there slowly. But then we did have a struggle there because we had to rewrite the entire application. We saw that if we don't rewrite it, it's gonna blue screen, it's gonna crash, the UI isn't that good. So we, rewriting the entire app. Already at that point, we had Planner, we had reporting, we had GPS, we had site surveys. So it took a long time to rewrite it. And at that time, like feature-wise, our competition caught up and went way past us, to be honest, before we could release the completely rewritten product. So we lost a lot of momentum there. Plus, we were not awesome at selling and marketing our product at the time.
Compared to now.
Yeah, now we rock.
So you return back to Finland, and just so everyone knows, you have R&D here, coding here, and offices in Reston. And what features? I mean, what part of the company works in each place?
That's pretty much the division, yeah. All of the R&D is actually done here. We outsource almost pretty much nothing to outside of this office. And in Reston, we have now the CEO, CFO, much of sales, much of marketing is these days based there as well. So it's a bipolar, I guess is the word of the day. I don't know if it's a Freudian or whatever, but yeah, we are very much we have in a way two headquarters. This is the R&D HQ, and then the management HQ is there in Reston, and North America is a very big market for us. So,
okay, well we're now. I just don't know how to ask this very nicely, but I just say it. So RTLS no longer part of Ekahau. What can you tell us about that kind of transition?
So yeah. RTLS, as you probably know, RTLS business was sold 1 year ago roughly. We sold that to a different company, and that allows us to focus in only in Wi-Fi design tools. Before that, we were making two different product lines, and with RTLS came location engine, came the tags, came the the application layer, tag configuration management, infrared beacons, everything. So it was quite a bit of work to maintain for a single small company to maintain all those product lines. Plus, Ekahau is a venture-funded company, right? So the venture capitalists, their goal is to sell, at least pieces of the business at some point. And apparently, they found a pretty good place for for 50% of the business. We got the RTLS business quite nicely up and running and going, and then could find a good home for that. And I think everybody was happy. The buyer was happy, VCs were happy, and we were happy to concentrate on the thing that we have been doing here for a long time.
So how much of the R&D staff was it 50-50 or so at the time of the breakup?
How should I put this? I don't know the exact numbers, to be honest, so I would need to estimate. But of the RTLS or of the whole R&D staff, we got to keep all the key people that were developing our tools, and RTLS people got the key people that were doing the RTLS stuff, and then we just had to make some kind of division between the people, and I played very little part in that, as in anything that requires politics or bureaucracy. So try to stay away from that as much as possible. But I think everybody was very happy with the outcome.
Okay. So what's the future hold for this? So Ekahau division that does Wi-Fi tools kept the name Ekahau. So what's the future look like for Ekahau moving forward?
Well, I think the future is very focused. So we get the focus in the thing that's been driving, this Ekahau's passion for the last 10 years, which is just making Wi-Fi work better with the entire community that's designing, deploying, and maintaining Wi-Fi networks. So that's pretty much our goal. And we want to be the provider to make those tools to help guys like you and, your small group of 18,000 friends to, improve this business. So I think that's been our focus, and it will continue to be our focus. We just need to do it better and do some things around just, site surveys and planning. And I think, as you perhaps know, there will be some announcements to come, in the coming months.
There's always good announcements.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a pretty wide industry, the Wi-Fi industry altogether, and we see that there's so much room for improvement. There's a lot of things that have been left, the way people did them in 2006, and it's about time for somebody to step up, invest a bit or a lot in, improving those toolkits and coming out with something totally different. And I think that's what our goal has been for the last 3-4 years, and you will start to see some results. I think you've already seen quite a bit of that with the improvements in the tool. I hope so, but there's more things to come.
Great. Appreciate your time. It's good that we had a chance to talk to Jussi and hear a little about the history of Ekahau and where they came from and where they're going. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Keith, for having me. Always a pleasure having you here as well.
Divergent Dynamics with Devin Akin. Highlights from Devin's own blog.
Today we're going to talk about AP and antenna mounting. VARs or my customers often deploy the network according to my design. My design will instruct them as to how and where to deploy and mount the APs and antennas. It's common during the validation phase, which follows deployment, for me to find APs mounted in a variety of incorrect ways. For examples, go to badfi.com, where Eddie Ferruolo has posted a variety of poor mounting scenarios. Installers should be at liberty to contact the network designer before deploying APs and antennas so that remounting isn't necessary. Redoing work can be expensive, as you might understand. Many APs today have internal antennas with down tilt, where their coverage pattern looks like an upside-down bowl when they're mounted on the ceiling instead of a big fat donut that we're often accustomed to in the past. They're often designed exactly for this type of deployment, the ceiling deployment. Therefore, mounting them on walls, under tables, and on tables doesn't produce the intended results. There are a variety of third-party mounting kits in the market that allow APs with internal antennas to be mounted on walls, but positioned horizontally as though they were mounted on ceilings, instead of being turned on their side. There are also swiveling mounts that allow you to tilt the AP or any external antennas so that they point to the intended coverage location. Network designers should liberally use external directional antennas in open areas so as to minimize co-channel interference and maximize capacity. The antenna manufacturers often sell a variety of antenna mounts such as mast mount and wall mount, ceiling mounts, I-beam mounts, and even enclosures, each with and without swivels. Sometimes installers have to custom make mounting kits. For example, warehouses usually require this, but those are small percentage use cases. So in a nutshell, to summarize, be careful with your AP and antenna mounting to put them where the designer specifically asks that they be, and this will decrease repetitive work. Thank you.
WLAN interview.
Welcome. I'm here in Helsinki, and I happen to be talking with Martin Ericson. Martin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Keith.
And we're in Helsinki, but you don't live here.
No, I'm living in Gothenburg, Sweden, so I flew over yesterday for delivering a class.
Well, I'm glad we're both here at the same time. Gave me a chance to give you a little interview. How long have you been on the CWNE board?
It's about 1.5 years now, coming up to 1.5 years.
Personally, I did it for many years and saw lots and lots of CWNE applications. And I thought, since I've got you here, it'd be a good chance for us for our listeners to hear What are the kind of things that the board of advisors from the CWNE board is looking for in a application? So if you were recommending to a new person who is thinking about putting in their application for CWNE, your recommendations, what should they do?
I mean, the requirements are listed on the webpage for CWNP, and we're actually looking through all of those requirements. There are some very important pieces that need to be put together. For example, the essays, which are a big variety of quality of those. The problem is that people are sometimes writing topics which is outside the whole idea of writing the essay. The essay should be about their professional experience and what they did do when they were attending or being part of a project. Sometimes you are seeing that people are explaining Wi-Fi, and that's not really what they should do. They should explain what the problems were, how they used their skills, and how they solved the problem, and document it in a way that is easy to read.
So on the essay portion, one recommendation, and I've also read hundreds of these, you don't need to teach the CWNE board how Wi-Fi works. So that's not the idea of the essay, don't teach. But what we do need to look for is what there was a problem, and then how did you solve it?
Yeah, exactly. And did you use your skills that you learned during your professional career where you started? And the best thing if you can pick up topics for the 3 essays from different areas. For example, having applications which is all about security is not really what we are looking for. It could be like if you can get one from CWAP, like troubleshooting using a sniffer, and another one could be like you have a spec problem, and the third one can be like you have some inconsistency with clients getting access to the network. That's really what we are looking for.
So 3 separate problems. Another recommendation I'd throw in there is we really don't care what brand it is. So telling us the model numbers of which part doesn't change the essay at all.
No, we don't need to know about the configuration of the how you configure a controller, or what if you had. It's enough if you say that you had a problem and you were able to find that it was a bug in the software, but we don't need to know exactly how you configured all the WLANs and all that stuff.
So from a length standpoint, a lot of people who don't write normally are a little afraid of that you're expecting 20-page reports or something.
No, I think a two-page report is good. It could be longer if you include pictures and diagrams, because those explains a lot of what the problem may be. But they had to be from the problem area, and it has to be like a snapshot. A screen snapshot from what the problem we're seeing. So if you are doing some kind of analyzing stuff, we need to see the trace with marks where you did see the problem. Then it could be bigger, but we don't need to have a full big topology of the customer website or something like that.
Yes, I'm just remembering some of the monsters we've had to review. So a lot of people coming into the CWNE, it's not like a test. You don't take a test to become a CWNE any longer. You have to submit this application. Tom Carpenter's working at CWNP, and he does most of the legwork in proving all the specifics are being met. What's the board's reviewed? What are you looking for when you're evaluating the application?
For example, I'm looking into their CV. Where have they been working, and what kind of things have they done before? So I would like to see that they have been in a position where they have worked in environments which are professional or on the enterprise level, and we also look into. I don't really look into spelling errors or stuff like that, because that's sometimes acceptable. But I do not really like that they are using terms which are Wi-Fi terms incorrectly, or doing some bad things, like picking up or writing something which a topic which you don't really understand. Maybe that's something they want to mention about security, but it made it all wrong. So I really like to applicants to really to go through their writing style a little bit and try to figure out if there was use a spell checker if you are not an English native speaking person, and don't write in a fancy academic way. You write your normal language you're using.
Right, like you talk.
Yeah, like you talk, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that comes along with the application is some letters of recommendation from others. On the board, in the past, we tried hard to encourage people to get other CWNEs to be those who fill out those recommendations. It's not a hard requirement, but for my time on the board, it made it much easier to know that another CWNE knew this person personally. So when you're evaluating those recommendations, what kind of recommendor are you looking for?
I personally like a little bit blending on that. At least it could be to have at least one of the recommendations to come from someone else with a professional level or wireless exams like a Cisco exam or a CWNE. But I would also like to see that someone in your organization who should not really be your manager should be some of your college which has done the same process. A team worker that you can maybe say some good words about you. I'm not really sure about customers, but if you have some big, nice customer which have made some big recommendation of you as a skilled person, that could be included also. But maybe not 3 of your HR people shouldn't probably sign this document.
3 of your best friends.
I'm not really happy with that either. I know there's a problem, but I think we need to improve that to really build some mentorship stuff. And
well, good. That was my very next question. Yeah. How do you see mentors in our industry? Is it something that's organic, or does it need to be organized? I mean, obviously, you've seen many CWNE applications coming across your desk. Some of which are pretty obvious they've had a mentor, others not. When someone asks you, how do you answer them? How do I find a mentor?
I haven't got that question more than once, and what I did, I pointed them to Ronald von Kloiren's website, where he has a list of all the CWNEs across the world. I know there's in some countries there are absolutely no CWNE whatsoever. But I really would like people to try to find a mentor. He could be a CWNA or maybe also, but someone who was maybe someone who trying to take the same exam as you. You can work in teams.
Very good.
And
you don't have to be in the same country.
No, I mean I had some guy from France who wanted to have assistance, and there are on LinkedIn there are some study groups you can attend. That's another way to get your questions answered. You can use the forums on CWNP also and ask questions, but you really should try to get some help. I really liked if the mentorship could be outside the board, that will be excellent. But for the state of for the state of affairs, that's what you say in the US, there are too few of us in some countries. We are only 24 in Europe and across 40 countries, so it's not easy. And I have seen a lot of applications where the CWNEs who are instructors in the US are signing up because they have learned the students in the class and they know that they are on a professional level. That's one way of doing it.
And I think Ronald van Kloenen out of Southeast Asia is doing a very good job there in working and getting CWNEs together, or at least CWNAs together socially, so that they can have a chance to talk and visit with others.
Yeah, I read the Twitter tags about that, and there seems people really enjoying it.
Yeah, I was in Singapore last month, and he just called an ad hoc meeting, and we got 20 or so wireless people just to come to an evening event just so we could get together and have pizza. It was great.
That's a way to do it.
Another part of the CWNE application process is being published. And some people are stressed. I don't have a blog. How am I supposed to have a blog? What am I supposed to do videos? What kind of things count toward that publication?
No, I think it's, as you're saying, that people are stressed to do that because there's a lot of varieties you can do it. As you mentioned, you can write a blog, but that takes a lot of time, and you shouldn't put up a blog just for this purpose. Maybe if you have internal...
No, you should put up a blog because you put up a blog.
Yeah, and
you
to continue.
need one for yourself. It's not just for this.
Yeah, but there's some where you see blogs with just one article, and that's not good, basically.
Yeah, and if they're in that situation and you don't want to do the hassle of a blog organization, there are lots of blogs that exist in the wireless LAN community today, and almost every one of them would be glad to take a guest blogger, so you don't have to do the work. All you have to do is write the blog article.
Exactly. But you can also, for example, if you have written some internal documents, like a white paper for explaining for your help desk how Wi-Fi works, the basic questions, you something like that. If you are doing
internal videos, I've seen some people submit their internal training videos. They're not released. So one of the things people are worried about is if they share personal or company information in their application, it's going to get, sent everywhere. And yet the board's job is to not send those on. So if someone marks something as not, being private, they don't leave. No,
they don't leave me. I do basically raise them afterwards. I keep the application itself so I can know who my judgment, but the basic stuff that I wrote, I don't need it anymore, basically. So you have to be. There are some essays with cases that the applicant has erased, and that's fine. You can use the company Acme.inc or something.
Yeah, the company name really doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. But you can also, for example, if you are doing you are presenting at a trade show, whatever you are doing that, if you have an internal PowerPoint that you are distributing to your customers or whatever, there's a lot of things you can do. And if you're unsure, just send Tom Carpenter an email and ask if this is okay to use.
I've rarely seen anything that wasn't okay to use.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be a difficult choice. In fact, the entire application, some people stress over the application process, but each individual piece isn't much. One recommendation is as you're taking your professional level exams, start on your application early. Don't wait till you're finished. You can have the application totally complete and then just wait for the last exam.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't matter if it just takes you 1 year to write the application. As long as it's finished the last day of your last exam, just send it in.
Just a time. So,
yeah.
Well,
otherwise you get stressed and say, I had to create 3 essays, and 4 years ago I did that, and 3 years ago I did this, and you have forgot what you're doing.
That's a great idea. You should be writing up those essays as they happen, as you have a cool project.
Yeah.
Well, to conclude here, what if you could say to someone who's thinking about becoming a CWNE, what's the one thing they could do to help the process along?
One thing that I found personally is schedule an exam. Because if you schedule an exam, you're going to lose money if you don't attend, and you're going to force you to start to read. If you don't schedule it, you're going to just postpone it, and put in something in between, and it will delay the process.
Very good. Thank you for your advice, Martin. Thanks for your time today, and hopefully we'll get together on another episode of the Wireless LAN podcast in the future. Thank you.
Wireless LAN terminology. Do you know what this word means?
Four-way handshake, a pairwise key management protocol defined by a standard. In IEEE 802.11, the handshake confirms mutual possession of a pairwise master key, PMK, by two parties and distributes a group temporal key, GTK.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Wireless LAN Professionals podcast. We had a nice quick 10 talk, an interview I did with Jussi on the history of Ekahau, some AP and antenna mounting with Devin, Akin, as well as an interview with Martin Ericson on how to prepare and get ready for your CWNE application. Thanks for listening to the end of the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the show notes on WLANpros.com. Thanks for listening to the whole show. We will be back next week with a whole new episode. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.